Hi, this is Ashlesh. Hope you're doing well. Okay, so there have been some questions, in fact, quite a few questions on how to deal with anxiety. And what I want to do in this video is there are three things. One is to have a language understanding of anxiety. The second thing is to understand the structure of what it means to feel anxious, and one technique that and what you can do when you're working with somebody. I will create a few more videos that can help, especially those of you who are working with other people. What are some things you can do to help people through this period? Okay. And if you're not working with people and you want to use this for yourself, so understand the structure and use it for yourself. So the first thing, from a language perspective, I want to say that anxiety actually does not exist. So if you look at the word anxiety, I'm not saying people do not feel anxious. I'm saying anxiety does not exist. So when we say I have fear or I have anxiety, remember we're talking about it as a thing. In language, we call it a nominalization. And what happens? A thing tends to become fixed. I have anxiety or I have fear. And what happens when it's a thing? It becomes very often it becomes difficult to move or to shift. So what we want to do is, instead of it being a thing, you want to help move it into a process. So what is the process form of anxiety? So I have anxiety, and the process is I feel anxious. Now, what is good about this, that I feel anxious? If somebody says, when somebody says I feel anxious, then that means they're getting a feeling, and it's triggered by something, but they're getting a feeling. If they can feel anxious, they can also learn to maybe feel maybe a little more comfortable or a little more relaxed, or maybe feel confident or determined. So the process is something that becomes more easy for us to shift. Okay. So when you hear people saying things like I have anxiety, of course, please don't tell them, okay, no, you don't, and tell them you feel anxious. It's a nominalization. Please don't do that. Listen to people, and in their language, you will know when something is shifting, when they also begin to start using, okay, I'm feeling anxious. So what you could do is maybe ask a question. So, or you can feed back to them when they say, I have anxiety. Okay, so what are you feeling anxious about? Or what do you feel anxious about? So through your language and through your question, you can begin to start turning it into a process. Because then they are more likely to respond with, okay, I feel anxious, or I'm feeling anxious about ABC. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. So you're helping them shift by a subtle use of your question. Now, the second thing is about the structure of anxiety, or how do we get anxious? It doesn't happen just like that. So feeling anxious is a feeling. Okay, so let's say this is the person, they're getting a feeling. Now, typically or generally, anxiousness tends to be an anticipation of something going wrong, bad, or something in the future. Okay, so what's happening is there is some image that they have of the future. Generally, it's the worst possible thing that can happen, and that image is triggering a feeling on the inside, which the person is feeling uncomfortable about. Okay, so this is the image, a movie, large, big, associated, and the feeling is being generated inside this person over here. Okay, so this typically tends to be the structure of anxiety. It's a future event generally. It's the use of the imagination, and it tends to be a distorted image. And by the way, it's useful in the way that when we look at the positive intention, it is there to protect us. Okay, but what happens, it becomes so distorted, our brain sometimes cannot tell the difference between real and imagination, and the reaction comes from watching that distorted image. Okay, so this is the visual. Generally, maybe there's an auditory also, but there's a visual, and there's the feeling that's being generated here. So you see there's a visual kinesthetic connection, VK connection. So that's the structure of anxiety. Okay, I'm calling it anxiety now. And the way to to change this is to break the pattern or change the pattern. Remember, when someone is feeling anxious, they will tend to have the same kind of image or similar kind of image. The feelings in their body will tend to be similar. They will tend to breathe a certain way. They will tend to use the eye muscles and the facial muscles in their body a certain way. All these are patterns of what's happening within the person. Now, when we can change even one or two elements, maybe the breathing change, the pattern of breathing changing, it can begin to start shifting the internal experience. Or maybe the internal dialogue change, and then it can begin to start shifting the internal experience. Or we can shift the image, the pattern of this image, and it can shift the internal experience of the person. How they feel can begin to start changing. Okay. So today, the technique that I want to mention is by using simple submodalities. So understand this once again. Here's the image, here's the person, and there's that image over here, and the person is responding, the body is responding to this image that they see. So, and typically it tends to be a future thing that they're imagining. So what we can do when you're using the way that you can use submodalities, you ask them to think about that event and ask them to begin to start noticing the sensations in their body or become aware of their body. Now, when they become aware of their body, you can get information, you can gather information like, okay, notice the experience in your body, notice your breathing, notice any tightness in your body. So gather the information. Where do you have the sensation in your body? So gather that information. And once you do that, the next thing you can do is you can have them change the submodalities, maybe drain the color. That's a big one, okay, for many people. Drain the color and notice your experience. Allow it to become less brighter, reduce the size and notice how you feel. Now, one thing that tends to, and you probably want to communicate this so sometimes people begin to start understanding this, that when they're making changes and the things are changing and the feelings are changing, they are actually beginning to control the situation. They are beginning to feel differently. So now there is a sense of control that they're beginning to experience. Okay. So by changing the submodalities and them beginning to get different images, you can help them first shift or disconnect the earlier connection of that image and the kinesthetic over here. Okay. Those of you know the fast phobia cure, you can also do the fast phobia cure for this. But typically, what you can do is just change the submodalities, maybe dissociate, and notice what happens. When they begin to start having a different experience internally, you can have them become more aware of the internal experience, and then you can also future pace and ask, okay, now, if in future you were to experience feeling anxious, notice what's happening. What do you see yourself? What do you feel yourself doing? And if you get them to a future pace a couple of times, and then they begin to, just by imagining, and then they're beginning to start changing it, now they've created some choice. Okay, so now they're choosing. They have some choice about how they can feel in this situation. Now, will this technique work in all situations? Not necessarily. Some people respond really well to submodality shifts. Some people probably don't. There are some other methods that I'm going to share. I will do some explaining timeline and what you can do with timeline. I'll also speak about some spinning the feelings and how you can use that for anxiety. I'd probably do maybe something on breathing also. All right. So I hope you found this useful. Please use this, and anyone, those of you using this to either for yourself or you're working with people, this is something that you can do. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay. Take care. All the best.